Welcome, everyone, to the deep dive. Especially for you focused on your daily UPSC Current Affairs, this session gets into the key developments from May 1st, 2025. This is part one.
And as you probably know, some topics might touch on things we've discussed before. Think of it as a good chance for revision.
Exactly. Today, we're covering quite a range. We'll go from cutting-edge brain-computer interfaces.
You're really pressing public health concerns like rabies and also the widespread issue of phthalates.
And we'll also look at some crucial international and national developments, too. We've pulled information from various sources, trying to give you a comprehensive but digestible overview for your preparation.
Okay, so where do we start?
Let's dive right in with brain-computer interfaces, or BCIs. There's been some exciting progress.
Yes, quite remarkable. The work at UCSF researchers managed stable BCI control of a robotic arm for someone paralyzed. And that was over 7 months.
7 months, wow, with minimal recalibration, right? That sounds like a major leap.
It really is.
But
just to recap for everyone, a BCI creates that direct link between the brain and an external device.
It decodes brain signals into commands. The idea is to bypass damaged pathways, potentially restore lost function.
And this UCSF development really moves things forward. We're way beyond those earlier systems that maybe just translated signals into text, often with a limited vocabulary.
Much more complex now. It's about motor control.
Precisely. So how does it work? Well, electrodes are surgically implanted onto the motor cortex. That's the brain's movement center.
Okay, so they pick up the signals for imagined movements.
Exactly. And then machine learning algorithms get to work decoding those signals. They even adapt over time as the brain's patterns naturally shift a bit.
And it's not just the tech, is it? The user trains, too.
Right. There's virtual training involved. The person learns to refine their mental control over a sort of virtual arm first.
Before applying it to the real thing. And the tasks they achieved. Picking up blocks, opening cabinets, using a water dispenser. That shows real precision.
It absolutely does. It signifies a huge potential shift, not just for assistive tech, but maybe even how humans interact with machines generally. Raises some big questions.
Definitely. And beyond motor control, you mentioned speech restoration.
Yes, that's another hugely compelling area. Think about people with conditions like brainstem stroke or ALS.
How does that work? Is it a similar principle?
Broadly, yes. Fine electrodes and artificial neural networks decode the intended speech from brain activity.
And that can become text or even audible speech or control an avatar.
Correct. And the speed is improving dramatically. There was a case study, a patient with ALS communicating at 62 words per minute.
62 words per minute. That's significantly faster than older BCI systems, isn't it?
Massively faster.
Yeah.
It involves, more sophisticated algorithms for decoding speech intent and higher resolution electrodes capturing more detailed brain activity. We're essentially getting better at reading the brain's language for speech.
Incredible potential there for transforming lives. Okay, let's shift gears now from neurotech to a persistent public health challenge. Rabies.
Yes. And sadly, there was that recent tragic case in Kerala. A 6-year-old died despite vaccination.
It's just heartbreaking, and it really underlines how serious rabies still is, even though it should be preventable.
Absolutely. Rabies is a zoonotic disease, meaning it jumps from animals to humans. It's caused by the rabies virus, RABV, attacking the nervous system.
It's an RNA virus, right?
No.
Part of the rhabdovirus family.
That's correct. And being an RNA virus means it can mutate fairly readily, which can sometimes complicate things like vaccine efficacy over the long term.
How does it actually get into the system and cause damage?
So it's usually transmitted through the saliva of an infected animal, typically a bite, though sometimes infected saliva in an open wound or mucous membrane can do it too.
And then?
It has 2 main pathways. It can go directly into the peripheral nervous system and travel up to the brain, or it might replicate first in muscle tissue near the bite, then enter the nervous system where nerves meet muscles.
And once it's in the nervous system?
It causes acute severe inflammation of the brain, encephalitis.
What about the timeline? How long after exposure do symptoms appear?
It varies quite a bit. The incubation period is typically 2 to 3 months, but it could be as short as a week or even stretch out to a year. Depends on things like where the bite was, how much virus got in.
And the initial symptoms might be quite general. Fever, pain.
Yes, maybe tingling at the wound site.
Yeah.
But once the virus hits the central nervous system, that's when the severe characteristic symptoms start. And crucially, once those clinical symptoms appear, rabies is, unfortunately, almost always 100% fatal.
A truly terrifying prospect. Are there different forms of the disease?
Clinically, yes. There's Furious rabies, characterized by hyperactivity, maybe hallucinations, fear of water, and then paralytic rabies, which causes gradual paralysis leading to coma and death.
And it's considered a neglected tropical disease.
It is. It disproportionately affects poor and vulnerable populations, often in rural parts of Asia and Africa where access to healthcare and dog vaccination might be limited. That Kerala incident really highlights that vaccination needs strong public health support awareness, accessible post-exposure treatment, especially for those most at risk.
So prevention is absolutely critical. What are the main strategies?
Vaccination is key. And vaccinating dogs, including puppies, is by far the most cost-effective way to stop transmission to humans, since dogs are responsible for up to 99% of human cases.
And if someone is exposed, bitten by a potentially rabid animal?
Then post-exposure prophylaxis, or PP, is vital. It involves immediate, thorough wound washing, administering human rabies immune globulin, or HRI, around the wound if possible, and a course of rabies vaccines.
And PPP is effective?
Extremely effective. If given promptly and correctly after exposure, it's nearly 100% effective at preventing the disease. So while it's fatal when symptoms show, rabies is preventable with the measures we have.
A stark reminder of the importance of public health measures. Okay, moving from that immediate threat to something more, perhaps, insidious and widespread. Phthalates.
Yes. These chemicals are everywhere, and there was a concerning finding recently linking daily exposure to a significant number of heart disease deaths globally.
Tell us more about that study.
It linked daily phthalate exposure to around 350,000 deaths. That's about 13% from heart disease globally in 2018, specifically among people aged 55 to 65.
13%. That's substantial. So what exactly are phthalates?
They're a family of chemical compounds used mainly as plasticizers, especially in polyvinyl chloride PVC, or vinyl as it's commonly known.
Right, vinyl flooring, things like that.
Exactly. They make plastic softer, more flexible. They're probably the most common plasticizers used worldwide, and they come in different types, usually categorized by molecular weight.
Where else might we find them? You said they're widespread?
Oh, the list is long. Besides vinyl flooring, they're in adhesives, detergents, lubricating oils, some automotive plastics, plastic clothing like raincoats, many personal care products, soaps, shampoos, hairsprays, nail polishes.
Personal care products, too?
Yes. Also plastic packaging film, garden hoses, inflatable toys, blood storage bags, medical tubing, even some children's toys, and certain inks used in printing.
Wow. Okay, so why are they a concern if they're so useful?
The main issue is that they aren't chemically bonded to the plastic polymer. They're just sort of mixed in.
Meaning they can come out?
Precisely. They can leach out of products over time or dissolve into liquids or fats they come into contact with. This leads to human exposure through ingestion, inhalation, skin contact, and environmental contamination.
And the health impacts. That heart disease link is alarming.
It is. Some phthalates are known endocrine disruptors. They can interfere with the body's hormone systems.
Like mimics or blockers of natural hormones.
Exactly. And this interference has been linked to a range of health problems. Changes in fertility, earlier puberty in girls, potentially increased risk of low birth weight, links to obesity and diabetes, impacts on the immune system, cardiovascular and respiratory problems, possibly some cancers, and even neurological or behavioral issues in children.
It really makes you think about the materials surrounding us every day.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's shift now to international trade and intellectual property, specifically the U.S. Trade Representative's Special 301 report.
Right, and the latest news is that India has once again been placed on the priority watch list in this report.
Can you explain what this report actually is? What's its purpose?
Sure. The Special 301 report is put out annually by the USTR, the U.S. Trade Representative's Office. It identifies countries that the U.S. government believes aren't providing adequate and effective protection for intellectual property rights, or IPR, or aren't giving fair market access to U.S. companies that rely on IP.
And it's been around for a while.
Yes, they've issued it every year since 1989.
Are there different levels of concern? What does priority watch list mean compared to other designations?
Yes, there are tiers. The most severe designation is priority foreign country, which can actually trigger investigations and potentially lead to U.S. trade sanctions. Below that is the priority watch country list, where India currently sits. This signals serious IPR deficiencies that the U.S. believes need greater attention.
And below that?
There's the watch list country designation for countries with IP issues deemed serious, but maybe not warranting the same level of immediate focus as the priority list. It's worth noting that countries on these lists can be both developed and developing nations.
So what's India's reaction or perspective on being kept on this priority watch list?
Well, India's consistent position has been that the report's targeting is, frankly, arbitrary. They argue it lacks solid empirical evidence and objective analysis.
They feel it's biased.
Essentially, yes. The argument is that it tends to reflect the concerns of specific U.S. industries about IP protection abroad, rather than being a neutral assessment of a country's IP regime according to international norms.
Okay, an ongoing point of friction in trade relations. Now, while dealing with these international dynamics, India is also focusing inward on its creative industries. Let's talk about WAM and WAVES 2025.
Yes, some exciting developments there. Finalists have just been selected from 11 cities for the national finale of WAM.
Remind us what WAM is.
WAM stands for Waves Anime and Manga Contest. It's actually India's first national initiative aimed specifically at discovering, nurturing, and promoting original Indian intellectual property IPs in areas like anime, manga, webtoons, and even cosplay.
That sounds like a really targeted effort to boost homegrown talent in these popular formats. Who's behind it?
It's organized by the Ministry of Information and Broadcasting, working together with the Media and Entertainment Association of India, or MEAI.
And the finale is part of a larger event.
Yes, the WAM finale will happen during WAVES 2025, the World Audiovisual and Entertainment Summit, which is being held from May 1st to 4th, 2025 in Mumbai.
Tell us about WAVES 2025 itself. What's its goal?
WAVES is positioned as a major event to promote India's strength in what's called the AVGC-XR sector. That's animation, visual effects, gaming, comics, and extended reality.
A rapidly growing sector globally.
Absolutely. And the theme for WAVES 2025 is Create in India, Create for the World. It really highlights India's ambition to become a global hub for creative content production in these fields.
Who is it aiming to bring together?
It's designed to convene global industry leaders, innovators, major studios, creators, policymakers, basically all the key players. They also ran Create in India challenges as part of this.
How's the response to those?
Pretty huge, actually. Over 1 lakh registrations, including, interestingly, about 1,100 international participants. Shows significant global interest.
And the summit itself will cover a broad range.
Yes, discussions and showcases on everything from traditional broadcasting and films to print media, radio, digital media, advertising, social media platforms, and cutting-edge tech like generative AI, AR, VR, and XR.
Quite comprehensive. Okay, let's travel from creative industries to space science, specifically looking at our sun. There's news about the near-surface shear layer.
That's right. An international team, which included scientists from the Indian Institute of Astrophysics, or IIA, has mapped dynamic plasma currents within this layer, the NSSL.
And they found something interesting relating to the sunspot cycle.
Yes, they discovered patterns in these plasma flows that seem to correlate with the sun's 11-year magnetic activity cycle.
Okay, before we get into the findings, can you quickly explain what the near-surface shear layer is?
Certainly, the NSSL is a really crucial region just beneath the sun's visible surface, the photosphere. It extends down maybe about 35,000 kilometers.
And what defines it?
The key characteristic is shear, a rapid change in rotation speed. In the NSSL, the sun's rotation speed decreases quite sharply as you go deeper down. And the shear isn't uniform. It changes with latitude and also with the sun's magnetic activity level.
So what did this new mapping reveal about the plasma flows within this shear layer?
They found that plasma flows near the surface tend to converge towards the mid-latitudes, where sunspots typically emerge. But deeper down, midway through the NSSL, these flows actually reverse direction and flow outward, away from the active latitudes.
Forming large circulation cells.
Exactly. Large circulation patterns driven by these converging surface flows and diverging deeper flows. These flows are also twisted by the sun's rotation and the Coriolis force, similar to how hurricanes form on Earth.
Does this help explain the sun's overall rotation patterns?
Well, interestingly, no, not directly the large-scale ones. While these localized flows near sunspot regions are very dynamic, the studies suggest they don't actually drive the sun's main large-scale flows, the ones called torsional oscillations, that migrate towards the equator over the solar cycle.
So something deeper must be driving those larger patterns.
So that's the implication. There are likely deeper, perhaps yet unknown, forces within the sun governing those large-scale zonal flows.
How did they map these flows inside the sun? You can't just look.
No, you can't. They used a technique called helioseismology. It's basically like seismology on Earth, but using sound waves that travel through the sun. By analyzing how these waves travel, scientists can infer details about the sun's interior structure and dynamics.
What data did they use?
They analyzed over a decade's worth of data. primarily from NASA's Solar Dynamics Observatory, or SDO, using its helioseismic and magnetic imager, HMI. They also use data from the Global Oscillations Network Group, GONG, run by the U.S. National Solar Observatory.
And they confirmed the findings.
Yes, they cross-checked their results using detailed 3D velocity maps derived from observing sunspot regions directly, which showed the same pattern of surface inflows and deeper outflows.
Fascinating glimpse into the sun's workings. All right, let's move back to Earth and focus on environmental conservation. There's a new global initiative called AIM for Nature.
Yes, this was recently launched. AIM for Nature stands for Accelerating Innovative Monitoring for Nature Restoration. It's a significant new global effort led by the FAO, the Food and Agriculture Organization of the UN.
And its main goal?
The core aim is to significantly boost the capacity of countries to monitor and report on their ecosystem restoration efforts. How well are they doing at bringing degraded lands and seas back to health?
Sounds important, especially with global biodiversity goals. What's the scale of this initiative?
It's a U.S.-signed $1 million program, primarily funded by the U.K., with GBP $7 million. It's set to run from 2025 through 2028.
And it ties into specific targets.
Yes. Critically, it's designed to support the achievement of Target 2 of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, the goal to restore at least 30% of degraded ecosystems globally by 2030.
How will it help countries achieve that monitoring?
Through a combination of things, leveraging cutting-edge monitoring technologies, like remote sensing and AI, promoting standardized data frameworks so results are comparable, and providing direct capacity development and training.
Is it focused only on forests?
No, that's an important point. While it's part of FAO's broader AIM for Forests program, AIM for Nature specifically expands the scope beyond just forests. It covers wetlands, grasslands, marine ecosystems, agricultural landscapes, a much wider range of ecosystems needing restoration.
What are some of the practical outputs we can expect?
They'll be developing practical guidance documents, technical tools, and importantly, the Framework for Ecosystem Restoration Monitoring, or FIRM. This is meant to be a go-to resource for countries on how to collect, analyze, and report restoration data effectively.
And it also mentions supporting indigenous peoples.
Yes, it explicitly includes support for indigenous peoples in monitoring what's termed biocentric nature restoration, an approach that really centers the well-being and interconnectedness of all living things within the ecosystem being restored.
A very holistic approach. Okay, next up, let's look at advancements in sustainable energy, specifically green hydrogen production.
Right. Researchers at INST Mohali, the Institute of Nanoscience and Technology, have developed some new insights into a crucial step in producing hydrogen: how protons behave on catalyst surfaces.
And this could lead to more efficient green hydrogen production.
That's the goal. Their key finding involves creating a novel heterostructure material.
What does that mean, a heterostructure?
It means they've combined two different materials at the nanoscale: copper tungsten oxide, CuO, and copper oxide, CuO. They grew tiny nanoparticles of CuO over a copper hydroxide precursor, which then transforms into CuO.
Okay, so you have these two materials joined together. Why is that beneficial?
This junction creates something called a p-n heterojunction, which has an asymmetric electronic structure. This asymmetry generates a built-in electric field, or BIF, right at the interface between the two materials.
A built-in field, and that helps with hydrogen production.
Yes, the BIF turns out to be crucial. It actively modulates how protons, which are just hydrogen ions, H+, adsorb onto the catalyst surface and then desorb from it. Getting that desorption balance right is key for the efficiency of the hydrogen evolution reaction, or HER, which is how hydrogen gas is made in electrolysis.
Can you explain that adsorption mechanism a bit more? How does the field influence it?
Well, the researchers looked at the Gibbs free energy, changes for proton adsorption, right at that CuO interface. They found a variation, especially near the depletion region of the junction.
A variation in energy needed for adsorption.
Exactly. This creates an energy gradient. It makes it energetically easier for hydrogen protons to adsorb onto the CuO side, but then promotes their desorption from the CuO side. It kind of pushes the protons through the reaction sequence more efficiently.
So it favors the overall reaction.
Precisely. They describe this effect as demonstrating negative cooperativity, where binding at one site makes binding less favorable elsewhere nearby, which actually helps the overall process, particularly the desorption step needed to release H0 gas in alkaline conditions.
Just to remind our listeners, what exactly is green hydrogen?
Right. Green hydrogen is hydrogen produced by splitting water electrolysis using electricity generated entirely from renewable sources like solar or wind power.
So no greenhouse gas emissions in its production.
Correct. The only byproduct is water vapor, making it a very clean and flexible energy carrier. This is in contrast to gray hydrogen, which is currently the most common type, produced from natural gas, a fossil fuel, which does release KOEROs.
And there are existing methods for green hydrogen, right?
Yes, methods like alkaline electrolysis, proton exchange membrane, PEM electrolysis, and solid oxide electrolysis, SOEC, exist. But improving the efficiency and lowering the cost, especially the catalysts involved, is a major research focus. This INST work targets that catalyst efficiency.
Very interesting development. Okay, let's move to international relations and focus on India's ties with Egypt.
Yes, the report highlights the strengthening of bilateral ties, particularly through strategic cooperation and skill development. This builds on the strategic partnership that India and Egypt formally established back in 2023.
Can you give us a quick refresher on Egypt's key geographical and geopolitical context?
Sure, Egypt is primarily in Northeast Africa, but its Sinai Peninsula extends into Southwest Asia, making it transcontinental. It borders Libya to the west, Sudan to the south, and Israel and the Gaza Strip to the northeast.
And it has significant coastlines?
Yes, on the Mediterranean Sea to the north and the Red Sea to the east. Of course, the defining geographical feature is the Nile River, the world's longest, flowing south to north through the country.
And the Aswan High Dam is a major feature on the Nile.
Absolutely. Inaugurated in 1971, it's crucial for controlling Nile floods, storing water for irrigation, and generating hydroelectric power. It also created the massive Lake Nasser Reservoir.
Geopolitically, its location is key, isn't it?
Extremely key, especially because Egypt controls the Suez Canal, that vital waterway connecting the Mediterranean and Red Seas. It's one of the world's most important shipping lanes.
How important is the Suez Canal specifically for India?
Very important. It's estimated that around 12% of India's total global trade passes through the Suez Canal. This makes Egypt a really crucial partner for India's maritime security and trade interests.
Underlines the strategic value of that partnership. Okay, finally, let's turn to heritage preservation here in India, focusing on the National Archives of India, the NAI.
Yes, the NAI recently added a significant collection to its repository, the private papers of the former president, Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam.
Tell us about the NAI itself. What is its role?
The National Archives of India operates under the Ministry of Culture. It's the official custodian of non-current records of the Government of India. Its job is to preserve these records, which have enduring value, and make them available for administrators and researchers. It's the biggest archive in South Asia.
It has a long history, doesn't it?
It does. It was first set up as the Imperial Record Department back in 1891 in Calcutta, now Kolkata. It was later decided to move it to New Delhi when the capital shifted.
When was the move completed?
The present building in Delhi was finished in 1926, but the full transfer of all records wasn't actually completed until 1937. The NAI is also responsible for implementing the Public Records Act of 1993 and its rules.
What kind of records does it hold? The scale must be immense.
It's vast. We're talking over 34 crore, that's 340 million pages of public records. This includes files, volumes, maps, treaties between states, rare manuscripts, cartographic records, parliamentary debates, census data, travel accounts, even proscribed literature, government gazettes.
A huge diversity of material. Does it hold everything?
Not quite. Access is governed by the Public Records Rules from 1997. Importantly, the NAI keeps and conserves government records, but does not receive classified documents. Its focus is on records deemed suitable for permanent preservation and public access eventually. It also has significant Oriental records in languages like Sanskrit, Persian, Arabic, etc.
Does the NAI have branches outside Delhi?
Yes, it has one regional office in Bhopal and 3 record centers located in Bhubaneswar, Jaipur, and Puducherry to manage records regionally.
And is it keeping up with digital access?
It is. They have an initiative called Abilek Patal, that's P-A-T-A-L, which stands for Portal for Access to Archives and Learning.
A digital portal.
Exactly. It's designed to make the archival records accessible online to users anywhere. It's a full web portal, and as of the report, it holds reference information for over 2.7 million files and provides online access to over 71,000 digitized records.
Making history more accessible. Well, that wraps up our deep dive for May 1st, 2025, Part 1, We've certainly covered a lot of ground today.
We really have, from BCIs and public health threats like rabies and phthalates.
To international trade issues, India's creative industry push, solar science, global conservation efforts, green energy breakthroughs, geopolitics with Egypt, and finally preserving our national memory at the NAI.
It shows how interconnected everything is, doesn't it? Technology, health, environment, economy, culture, history.
Absolutely. And relevant for your UPSC preparation, understanding these diverse developments and their connections is key. As a final thought, perhaps consider this. With BCI technology advancing so rapidly, what ethical considerations do you think will become increasingly important in the coming years? Or maybe, how do you assess the challenges and opportunities for India's IP landscape given its continued presence on the Special 301 list?
Good questions to ponder. Keep thinking critically about these issues.
Indeed. If you found this deep dive helpful, please do like and subscribe so you don't miss our future updates. Thanks for joining us.